had a few messages from people asking me why I've not done a video for this week's EBU European heavyweight title fight on the Monaco bill between Dereck, Chisora even, and Agit Kabayel. And the honest reason to why I haven't done a video on it was because up until today I'd never actually seen Agit Kabayel fight before. So he's not someone I'd formed any opinions on whatsoever, and I really didn't have much to say ahead of the fight, having not seen what he's got to offer. I had a look on Oddschecker yesterday and see that Dereck Chisora is a 4-7 favourite to win the fight, which means he is anticipated to win from a bookmaking perspective, but the bookmakers don't see it as an easy fight for him. They certainly see it as a substantial element of risk there, and they see Agit Kabayel as a live underdog. So having researched hard, I have actually been able to track down some footage on the opponent, Agit Kabayel, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Firstly, having looked him up on BoxRec, and I'm going to introduce him via BoxRec because you know, being frank, I think there's quite a few of us who will be watching this video who, like myself, haven't seen him fight before. But BoxRec have him as the 34th best heavyweight currently active globally. They say he's 6'3", so I guess you could say a mid-sized heavyweight from that perspective. And they say he is 25 years old, so a relatively young guy for the heavyweight division. That's why he's kind of a fresh-faced guy who maybe we haven't seen on the scene for so long. In terms of his resume, sorry, I didn't say in his record, it's 16 wins, no losses, no draws, so a completely undefeated fighter. 12 knockouts from his 16 wins, so a 75% KO ratio. In terms of who he's been in the ring with, I didn't recognise most of the opposition from his first 14 fights, being frank. The one name I did recognise was Benga Alukan, who's kind of a well-known European opponent. I've seen him used by the Sauerlands a few times. He won that fight against Benga Alukan via a split decision, which kind of made me question, you know, put one slight question mark over his name. More recently, he stepped up in level somewhat. He fought Christian Lewandowski, who was a 9-0 heavyweight prospect, and if I recall, was a heavyweight prospect with a little bit of hype around him. And then he fought Herve Hubu, I'm sure I've pronounced that surname wrong, but what can you do, who was 26-1, and Agit Kabayel won by points. So yeah, resume is suggestive of a young fighter who's been relatively untested in his career to date, and Dereck Chisora does represent a substantial step up in class. Now, looking at Chisora's record, he's 33 years old. He's got 7 losses on his ledger now, 2 of them by KO. But Chisora is a guy who, as we know, has campaigned at a much higher level. In fights last year against Dillian Whyte versus Kubrat Pulev, he was unsuccessful on both occasions, and if we're frank, that tends to be what happens to Dereck Chisora when he steps up above European level. But on both of those fights, he showed that he's still got some desire left. He's shown that he's still got some capability left. You know, a lot of people thought that he got the better of Dillian Whyte. And the Kubrat Pulev fight, I think one of the judges even scored it to Del Boy, which was slightly against my scorecard, if I remember. So Chisora, well-established competitor at this sort of level. You know, tends to be victorious against sub-Euro level. Tends to come up in a loss at a level above Euro level. This fight against Agit Kabayel, the reigning European EBU champion, is kind of right in the sweet spot of what makes for a competitive Dereck Chisora fight. So, wanted to have a bit of a look at Agit Kabayel. I was able to track down his fight against Christian Lewandowski, so I watched that, and I also had a... let me have a look. I also had a look at a few rounds from the Benga Alukan fight. So, my initial impression on Agit Kabayel is that he actually is a very similar fighter to Dereck Chisora. And look, there might be people who've been watching this guy for years, watching him in the amateurs. There might be people who've sat down and watched all of his fights and know far more than me. So if you are one of those people, educate me. please leave a comment in the section below. But based off the extremely small and limited footage that I have seen on him, he strikes me as a very, very similar fighter to Dereck Chisora. This is not a guy who's going to get up on his toes like Muhammad Ali and start shooting a jab and trying to outpoint an opponent from range. This is a heavyweight who comes forward, fights quite short, and comes forward like a stalker, looks to position you with his jab, and then looks to take the fight on the inside. Good body puncher, seems to be a good body puncher, seems to have a decent engine. Sometimes tucks a nice uppercut up the middle when he's up at close range. I haven't seen any punch resistance problems from him whatsoever. Although the level he's been operating at means that his punch resistance probably hasn't been tested. And yeah, he seems to have at least a level of power and a, you know, certainly in that Lewandowski fight, Lewandowski was the bigger guy, rangier guy, was seemingly the more technical boxer from range and was, you know, landing some decent punches, but Kabayel just kept coming forward and kind of ground him down, and we saw Lewandowski's gas tank empty and Kabayel was still coming forward, putting punches together, closing down the range, banking punches to the body, and yeah, all in all it was a fairly decent performance. Look, he's not the most athletic guy, he's certainly not the fastest guy, he's not the most technical, you know, this is, I presume he wasn't some sort of amateur standout. He's a guy who, like Dereck Chisora, is going to come forward and, you know, try and meet someone in the centre of the ring, sit on their chest and grind them down. He has similar fragility in his game to Dereck Chisora. I think he's quite defensively open. You know, he's easy to tag, and I also think he, you know, when he's caught, he's got a tendency just to throw back and go into sort of a gunslinger mode. He's not calm under pressure. He's not someone who, you know, will sit there and take 3 or 4 punches on his arms and necessarily wait for the right time to empty his gun. Instead, he's just, you know, if he feels that kind of pressure, he just kind of lunges in. Where else am I going? Also quite wild, quite raw, quite inaccurate. He does have a tendency to load up on punches. I think Irish Tom referred to them on the Dillian White fight as roundhouse punches, but he has a tendency to, you know, throw a big wild hook that will lead to his whole body spinning around. You know, quite inaccurate in that sense. So Kabayel, interesting fighter, similar to a Chisora, I would say. Look, if this was Hughie Fury versus Kabayel, if this was you know, tall, rangy fighter who jabs and moves, I think they would have an easy night's work. But with Dereck Chisora, I think he's going to be looking at a younger mirror image of himself coming straight at him. And you know what? It could actually develop into a decent scrap this. The two guys could meet in the centre of the ring. Neither of them are going to be trying to outscore each other with the jab, I suspect. Neither of them are going to be, you know, worrying about tip-tap stuff. You're going to see two guys with decent engines and bad intentions throwing and looking for an inside war. Could actually be like a Dillian White, Dereck Chisora type fight. So interesting to see. In terms of my prediction, on the limited footage that I have seen, I'm going to pick Dereck Chisora to win this fight. As I've already said, Chisora proven his wares at a lot higher level than Kabayel, and still showed that he had quite a lot to offer last year against Dillian White and Kubrat Pulev. Chisora is now working with Eddie Hearn, and you kind of get the impression that they wouldn't have formed that formalised relationship unless there was a master plan. Now, whether the master plan is a pay-per-view rematch with Dillian White that would represent a huge payday for Chisora, or whether the master plan is winning the EBU title so he gets ranked highly in the governing bodies and then trying to manoeuvre Dereck Chisora so he can get a title shot against the likes of a Wilder or a Joseph Parker, or God only knows, maybe even a Joshua. I don't know. But I suspect that the reason they've come to that relationship is because there's some sort of plan to get Dereck Chisora in noteworthy, meaningful fights. And, you know, this is the banana skin, if you like. This is the fight that he's got to come through in order to get that EBU title, presumably get himself up in the rankings, and then can be used as a platform to go elsewhere. So I would say at 33 years of age, with 7 losses on his resume, Chisora is really in a can't-lose fight here. Now, for Kabayel, this is a huge step up in opposition. Dereck Chisora is no Joe Fraser, don't get me wrong. But compared to the level that Kabayel's been in with, Chisora represents a big step up. Now, based on the eye test, and based on the eye test alone, I detect that Chisora has a little bit more snap to his punches and a little bit more education in terms of his work. You know, I think he's obviously got that experience, which you'd expect given his resume. I just kind of feel that he's going to be a bit more savvy out of the 2 guys in there. And I think where Kabayel normally gets through fights by simply grinding down opponents and maybe being the tougher man and maybe being the the guy who's got the better natural engine, I don't think those advantages he's enjoyed in the past are going to be present in the Dereck Chisora fight. I also think, and I'm not saying Chisora is any sort of Floyd Mayweather defensively, but I also think Kabayel will be taking more punishment in this fight than he's taken previously because of the way his defence is open, and I think Chisora is the kind of operator who can capitalise on it. All in all, I do see this as a risky fight for Chisora, and I cannot say with confidence that he's going to win. I really can't. I'm not sitting here telling you it's an 80% likelihood or anything like that, because there's a lot of similarities between the 2 guys, and Kabayel is certainly younger and fresher. But in these kind of fights, you have to make a pick as to whether you want to go with youth and freshness or whether you want to go with experience and the benefit of that education from having been in the ring with the Furies and Klitschko's. I think Chisora's still got something left to offer. Looking at Agit Kabayel, I wonder if there's a rawness to his game, which will mean that he needs quite a little bit more experience before he steps up to that top 20, top 30 level, which Chisora still represents. So by the narrowest of margins, I'm picking Dereck Chisora. I suspect the fight may well go to points. I've always thought Chisora's punching power is ever so slightly overrated, and Kabayel, he looks tough. But we shall see. This is not one of these predictions I'm going to take to the bank. This is a prediction based off some grainy footage I've seen on YouTube without proper education on my behalf here. So not one I'm taking to the bank, but enough people wanted me to make this video that I'm going to do it. And I'm going to just about side by Dereck Chisora. Let me know your thoughts. Leave your comments in the section below. If you've enjoyed this video, if it was informative in any way, please take the time to click the thumbs up button. We've hit 6,000 subscribers, so let's keep the ball rolling. If you're new or you haven't done so before, please do take the time to press subscribe. And yeah, who knows? Maybe we can aim for 7,000 for the new year. I don't know, that's ambitious, but there you go. Cheers guys, as always, appreciate you taking the time to tune in to my channel.